Hello and welcome to CYNAM 23.2. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Chris Stunning-Walton. I'm one of the directors with CYNAM.
I'm Reid Darby, and I'm also one of the directors at CYNAM.
And we're very excited to be bringing you our second headline event of 2023. Thank you for joining us tonight at the Cheltenham Science Festival. And for the next hour and a half, we'll be exploring the theme of sustainable cyber and how cybersecurity can enable a net zero future.
Before we start, though, we have some very important thank yous to make and some event information to run through. A huge thank you to our headline sponsor for this event, Atkins. A special thank you to Gemma Calderoni for being a driving force behind this event and the partnership. We also make sure that you come to the Nook afterwards for some post-event networking. I've heard that there might be, one or two drinks. And a massive thank you to QA for sponsoring this segment of the evening.
Absolutely, and thank you so much to our annual sponsors, who are Atkins, again, thank you, CACI, Soprasteria, Gloucestershire College, UWE, Orna, Cypro, and Hamiltonian Dynamics. I would also like to say thank you to our additional supporters for today's event, NCSC and Plexel.
So, the agenda. Sustainable cyber. What is sustainable cyber? Well, we're going to start off with some big picture stuff, some strategy, some high-level stuff, and we've got some great speakers tonight. You can see them on the screen. And then we're going to get into some technical detail on a few areas, and that's going to be really quite interesting. And then we'll have a wrap-up at the end, and if we're good, we might have some time for questions.
Yeah, that's right. We hope to have some time for questions. It just depends how we've got a really packed schedule tonight. So if we can squeeze in some questions at the end, we will. There'll be roving mics that will be coming around if we're able to do
that. Yeah, you can tell we rehearsed. Without speakers, this event would not be possible. And we've got a huge thank you to the CYNAM team. And we would not be able to do this. Well, we certainly wouldn't be able to do this without our CYNAM team. So thank you so much for all your help.
Yeah, and Production AV, stand up, you're the guys at the back. They are making all this happen. They are fantastic. If you're a local business that's doing anything production-wise, please do check them out. They are well worth it. Thank you so much. Cheltenham Festivals have been amazing at allowing this event to happen. They are a charity. Please keep a lookout at the end of the event of how you can support them. If you think this event is valuable, please contribute to that value. We want these events to be free and inclusive for everybody, for every event that we do. But if you think it's valuable, please support the charity that is Cheltenham Festivals.
So let's get into the first session. We have Dr. Mai Bui from UKRI, who is going to be talking to us about carbon capture. Let's welcome.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I actually have over 12 years of experience working in research on carbon capture and storage, looking at all different applications, so trying to decarbonize power, industry, and then more recently on CO2 removal from the atmosphere. So I'm going to talk to you about a program that we have called the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge and the role of different technologies in reaching net zero for the UK. So one of the key issues is when we're making different materials, you're going to need energy. Often the energy comes from fossil fuels. The industrial sector in particular is very difficult because it's a very hard to abate sector. It relies a lot on fossil fuels. And so there's a lot of CO2 emissions as a result. These CO2 emissions can come from various different processes. So making cement, making steel, the paper and pulp industry, these will release CO2 emissions. And these can come in the form of clusters. So within the UK, you've got certain regions where the point sources are closely located together. So these are called industrial clusters. So they're kind of good spots to target to try to reduce our emissions and decarbonize. There's also dispersed sites where they're kind of a bit further away, so it's going to be a bit more challenging to decarbonize, and these are called dispersed sites. And so right now with the program, we're really just focused on industrial clusters because this is sort of the easy way to kind of low-hanging fruit to try to reduce our emissions at a significant level. So how do we do this? So the UK, they've legislated a target of net zero by 2050. That's quite challenging. It's a multi-scale problem. So you're trying to look at processes that have molecular scale effects. This feeds into process level systems that operate at certain efficiencies, at certain costs. And then you've got to think about nationally, strategically, how do you deploy these combinations of technologies in a way that's cost effective, that's socially equitable, and then at a global level, thinking about the supply chains that are involved. And so you've also got multiple sectors that you're trying to decarbonize. So not just industry, the power sector, the transport sector, heating sector, and then also trying to integrate these CO2 removal technologies because you can't capture all of your CO2. There's always going to be a little bit left that's not captured. And this is where you need to do negative emissions or CO2 removal from the atmosphere to balance it all out and eventually reach net zero. So the question is, what would you need to build? Where would you build these different technologies, when, why, and how we will operate this. So we have to think of this at a systems level, national level, thinking about the different options that we have to deploy in those different industries. So often you try to think about this in a sort of systems level, trying to minimize the total cost of the whole system, subject to providing energy security, or security of different supplies of materials, and then also minimizing your CO2 emissions. And more importantly is trying to think about this social equitable piece. So trying to also improve social equity by maximizing the number of jobs that you create and retaining the jobs, and then also maximizing GDP for the economy. And so with the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, we try to take into account all these different factors. So the program is looking to provide £210 million of public funding to try to invest into supporting low carbon technologies and infrastructure. It's also match funded from industry at an amount of £261 million. And so it's running from, it started in 2019 and will end in 2024. And ultimately, we're trying to trying to think of what types of technology options you would deploy in 6 of the largest UK industrial clusters and try to reduce the emissions from the energy intensive industries. And so it's split off into 3 key streams. So we've got the largest investment in the deployment projects, and then that's about £171 million. And then you've got cluster plans, £8 million. And then also the research side of things. So looking at setting up, and now that's established, is this Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre, or IDRIC. And that's about £20 million to go towards advancing research in industrial decarbonisation. So the program is countrywide, and so there's individual projects. So in the deployment projects shown in green, these are focused on looking at detailed plans in terms of the large scale infrastructure that we would need. So it's using commercial ready technologies. And so this is sort of more in the near term. In the long term, we're thinking more the cluster plans. So the cluster plans are thinking more into the future. So what type of future infrastructure and what type of future technology you would deploy, thinking about the business models, the commercial models, financial models you would need to deliver net zero in those key industrial clusters. And then lastly is the research component. So that's IDRIC. And so here's just a snapshot of some of the portfolio of deployment projects across the UK. And so this is just to give you an insight on where they are. They've each got their own individual plans. And the reason this is the case is in each of these industrial clusters, they're very much unique in terms of the combination of industry that's involved. And so they've got different types of CO2 emissions at different CO2 concentrations. So the technology options you would need to think about has to be tailored for that specific industrial cluster. They've also got different existing assets. And so you have to take into account that when you're developing your strategy, what existing assets are there, and then what you actually need to build into the future. And so just to kind of give a snapshot on what type of technologies you're thinking about, so you've got a range of options that you could deploy. This is just to show that they are at different levels of readiness. So not all of them will be ready to go today, but there are some that are key. So carbon capture, for instance, hydrogen fuel switching. These are more in the advanced level of sort of deployment. They're ready to go, and they're going to be important key technologies. And that's where the research side is really important to advance the more newer options. And just to give you a snapshot on an example here, showing how we might go through technology research and development. So on the left is where we're trying to demonstrate the technology in industrial scale processes. So this is a facility, the photo showing a facility in Norway, which shows how you operate CO2 capture processes at industrial scale. And you can start learning, developing, understanding, practical operating experience, and then really starting to understand how you would do this even at larger scale. And then on the right, you're thinking about the modeling side of things. So you're looking at the process scale modeling all the way up to the systems level, thinking of a national UK-wide model. And this is really to help understand the impacts and costs and on the technical performance of the individual technologies. So just to kind of show what you can learn is this spatial model which showing over time the deployment of the technologies and the CO2 emissions that you would capture that you would need to store. And it would just show you where the sort of key spots you would think about to sort of deploy, let's say, CO2 transport infrastructure. And then also thinking about where the clusters are and then where the CO2 storage sites are. And then now we can start linking things together and start deploying and thinking about the infrastructure and where you would build them to minimize cost. And then, as I mentioned before, the social impacts is really important. So then integrating these types of understandings with social equity type of modeling approaches. So this is an example of a jobs economic development impact model, or JEDI, they call it. And essentially, it's looking at trying to the social economic impacts of deploying hydrogen technologies. And so on the right, we can see the impact on GVA within the UK, and then how you get spillover economic benefits around the different clusters around the UK. So then you can start understanding the social impacts of certain strategies. And so why is this all important? Decarbonising industry feeds into all the other industries. You're making green steel, green cement, green products that then feed into trying to reduce the emissions of your overall system in terms of the other sectors. So, transport, heating, and also power. And so this is the key sort of goal with trying to decarbonise industry. And so key things to think about and just to take away messages is that the technology, we've got technologies that are ready today. They're well understood. So things like carbon capture and storage, hydrogen production, we can deliver these. They're technically feasible. We know, for instance, something like carbon capture and storage, it's an important technology in the power sector. You're looking at trying to provide dispatchable power that can help balance intermittent renewables in the production of hydrogen, which then can also provide low carbon hydrogen that you can help use to decarbonize industry and other sectors. Also with the carbon capture side of things, it's also important because if you do sort of systems model, you can see modeling that it helps minimize the cost of the overall system. And so it provides flexibility to the energy system and it also reduces the burden on trying to rely on the more expensive options of CO2 removal from the atmosphere. Although we don't want to put too much burden on that because it's a limited supply, we do definitely need some sort of CO2 removal from the atmosphere. And then lastly, as I showed, considering sort of holistically at a systems level is really important because you're trying to minimize costs, taking into account location-specific impacts of deploying the technologies like CO2 capture and thinking about where you build transport and storage infrastructure. And so ultimately, there's also social economic benefits that you also have to wrap into all of this and think about. So thanks very much, and hopefully that was enough information. My colleagues Vicky and Natalie are also here during the networking event if you have further questions.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you, Mai. Now, very quickly about UKRI, you can see the scale of the programs that they're doing. Some huge programs, and cybersecurity incorporated into those programs is going to be a very important part of making them successful. They are here if you are involved with, own a cybersecurity company that's doing some cool stuff in IoT or that feels they can add value. Please connect. Please see what you can do for UKRI. They are buyers, potentially, but some really cool stuff. Okay, moving on to our second speaker, highlighting Britain's greenest energy company. And for this, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome the CEO of Ecotricity as well as Green Britain Group to the stage, Asif Memonwala. Asif.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I've been asked to do a 10-minute spotlight talk on Ecotricity. And just before I get started, I thought I'd ask people to stand up if they've heard of Ecotricity before. So if you have heard of Ecotricity, please stand up. Right, that's actually very useful. There's probably about 60% of the room that stood up. That will help my talk. Thank you. So Ecotricity. Ecotricity is the world's first renewable energy company. It's Britain's greenest energy company. We supply 100% green energy to all of our 200,000 customers. We also generate renewable energy by mainly onshore wind and ground-mounted solar on people's roofs and on agricultural land, land which isn't useful for agriculture. The company's been in place for 27 years. I'm going to talk through a chronology of events that have been inspiring for the company over that time period, and also, of course, talk about cybersecurity and the impact on renewable energy, on the impact on the energy industry. First thing to say before I move on is that it's been a really, really tough energy market for the last 18, 24 months. You've probably heard a lot of that in the news. We've had 30, 35 companies exit the market in the last 18 to 24 months. We're now down to about 18, 19 energy companies remaining, and it's been great for us that we've been able to stay in business and really push forward with the renewable energy front towards a more decarbonised, sustainable future. So, starting off with our journey to date, our owner and founder, Dale Vince, started the company in 1995 as the world's first green energy company. He started with putting up a wind turbine in Stroud, in Nymphsfield, about 20 miles from here. When he first attempted to do that, he got laughed at by the planners, he got laughed at by the banks, but he persevered, and 4 years later, he was able to put that first wind turbine in place, and that is still there to date. In 1999, Britain's first megawatt windmill was installed at Swaffham, and then in 2001, Britain's first on-site windmill was completed. And what that means, on-site windmill, is a turbine that was on a business premises where the business could use renewable energy directly from the turbine. So that was at Sainsbury's distribution centre, and that turbine is still operating to date. In 2010, we were the first company to bring in green gas into the country from Holland across the pipeline. So we were able to offer a true 100% green tariff for electricity and gas, which was a big first. And in 2011, we launched our first hybrid wind and sun park, and we kick-started Britain's EV revolution, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. In 2018, we became the world's first only vegan energy supplier. That was important for us for our ethics and our morals. And in 2018, we launched a mobile phone network called EcoTalk, a mobile phone service with a difference, where we're trying to green up the network, and we're also reinvesting any profits back into rewilding land, so back into nature effectively. I should have also said that Ecotricity is a vertically integrated energy company with generation, trading and supply, and all of the money that it makes from its customers is reinvested back in building renewable sources of energy. In 2021, we signed an agreement to bring geothermal energy to the grid for the first time down in Cornwall, and that's a project that's going live. And as we speak, we're building our first green gas mill, which begins operating next month. A green gas mill is taking grass as feedstock, putting it into an anaerobic digester and creating green gas, which can be supplied through the distribution grid into people's homes. So that's been our journey, some key moments there. Some key inspirational moments to recall, I guess. In 1996, we supplied Cheltenham and Gloucester College with the first green energy in the market. I mentioned in 2010 we became a green gas supplier, and I just wanted to touch on those two things that I mentioned around introducing electric vehicle charging across the country in motorway service stations up and down the country from John O'Groats to Land's End. And we started that, as I said, in 2011. Again, that was something that people kind of laughed at us, saying there's only 2 or 3 EVs on the road. Why are you putting infrastructure into the motorway network? 10 years later, we sold that to Hitachi and GridServe because they've got the big bucks to be able to invest in the grid and be able to put that infrastructure in place for all of the electric vehicles that are coming. That was an inspirational time for us to be able to do that. I mentioned having a hybrid renewable energy park, which is where you have a wind park, a solar park, and in the future, batteries for storage going forward. I also mentioned our gas plant. So on the topic of the day, why is cybersecurity important in renewable energy? Well, firstly, energy itself, not just renewable energy, all energy is critical infrastructure. So if anything happened in the energy market, that would be quite devastating, as we've seen happen, unfortunately, in some parts of Ukraine as part of the war that's happening over there. The energy system is massively connected. It's connected through the grid, nationally, through the distribution system, but also connected, of course, in people's homes. And it could be a target for cybercrime. I think that's been talked about quite a lot. There's quite a lot been written about it, just because of the vast amount of data and the disruption that it would cause. In terms of the target, we've seen in the news, I think in the last day, of the disruption that's been caused by the attack on British Airways, on Aer Lingus, on Boots. And it's the same with the energy market. If it happened, the target could be a customer database, it could be payment details, it could be smart meter data, it could be a whole host of things that could be a target. So we have to be really, really careful in terms of how we handle that security for all of that information. And what we've done is we've implemented risk-based security measures. It's very difficult to try and manage every single risk right across the piece. So we've tried to prioritize and understand the key areas where we can kind of manage and measure that security risk. And a couple of objectives. One is a recovery point objective, which is effectively when something happens, how quickly can you bring something back? So like an infrastructure, like a wind park or a server or something like that. And second is recovery time objectives, which is data. If you lose data, how quickly can you get that data back? Because the industry is effectively run on data, meter data, payment history, all of that kind of stuff. And we work closely with GCHQ and NCSC or CC on those things by trying to get some advice from them in terms of how we should operate as a company that is nationally across the whole of the UK in such an important market. Green Britain Group. So recently we created a group company called Green Britain Group, which is effectively investing in innovative new sectors to decarbonise those areas. So I've mentioned EcoTalk being the phone network being one. We also have a diamond making business, which sounds very odd, but we're taking carbon from the atmosphere using green gas to make lab-grown diamonds, which can be sold as a competitor to mine diamonds. That's something that we've started. It's a frontier for our owner, and it's fantastic to be involved in something that has such an R&D element and now is going live in the retail market. We also have a wind turbine manufacturing company called Britwind, which manufactures small wind turbines that can be put on rural land or can be sold abroad like we do to Japan every year. We sell about 100 turbines to Japan. And then also finally, we have a vegan food manufacturing business. That food manufacturing business is selling a few thousand kilograms of vegan food to many, many schools across the country. We also have a football club, Forest Green Rovers, which is the world's greenest football club, and it's an example of where you can take the message of sustainability into a different audience, which has been really, really successful for us. And finally, the future. Well, the future is changing from an energy point of view, especially renewable energy. We currently have grid-connected renewable energy, but we're moving into the world of smart, where people's homes will become a hub for energy. We'll have solar panels on more people's roofs. We'll have a battery. We'll have electric vehicle charging points. We'll have heat pumps. So there's lots of infrastructure that's coming in people's homes. From a cybersecurity point of view, it's not just the grid-connected stuff. The homes are going to be a hub for energy for the next 10 years. That's going to be the big frontier. So I think that's me out of time with about 4 seconds left. So I'll pass on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Asif, thank you very much. I mean, how inspirational. The first thing really that comes to mind is, what a great story to have that vision right at the beginning and go all the way through. So, well done to Ecotricity and the team. The other thing that really comes to mind is, as a green energy company, is there something specific in the cybersecurity sector? Do you have particular risks in doing green energy? And I don't know. And then getting into that broader critical national infrastructure, really interesting. The other thing I'd love to find out, and you're probably not going to be able to tell me, is can you work out from your clients how many cybersecurity companies are actually very green? It would be really interesting to find out how many cybersecurity related companies are using green energy, and I'm sure there'll be some stats there for that. But thank you for that, Asif. So we've had some big picture stuff looking at carbon capture. We've had some green energy and looking at starting to think about the relationship with cyber. We're going to move now to another place. We're going to have Andre Pinar coming up onto the stage, CEO and founder of C5 Capital, specialist venture capital firm investing in cybersecurity, space, and energy security. So we've got quite a lot there. I'm sure that we're going to have some really interesting perspectives from Andre. So give Andre a round of applause. Come on up.
It's a great pleasure to be with you this evening at the Cheltenham Science Festival. Einstein said that energy is everything, and certainly in C5 we agree with him with our investment focus on cybersecurity, energy and space. And you would ask, how are these three components connected, and what is the role that each of these three components will play in the energy transition? And I hope to share some thoughts with you about this evening. When we today look at the role of clean energy, I want to focus in on nuclear energy as a very important part of the clean energy transition. Nuclear energy is a baseload energy, which means it's always on. It can provide energy day and night and has a 90% reliability record for providing energy, and is therefore a very reliable source of energy. But it's also carbon fuel free, and therefore today considered to be a very important part of the energy transition alongside renewables. The key numbers when we think about the nuclear energy sector today are 10, 440, and 30 plus 50. So today worldwide, the nuclear energy sector provides about 10% of the world's energy needs across 440 different nuclear plants spread across 30 countries, with 50 new plants being built. However, in the industrialized world, the numbers are considerably higher. Here in the UK, the nuclear energy industry provides between 20 and 30% of the country's energy needs, but more than 50% of the clean energy that's being produced in the UK today. In countries like France, up to 90% of the country's energy needs. So nuclear has a very important contribution to make. Historically, when we think about nuclear energy power, we think about great big nuclear power plants like the ones we have at Sellafield, which are called Generation 3 reactors. In recent years, the safety record of the nuclear industry has become impeccable. As Bill Gates says, nuclear energy is safer than food, because the nuclear safety record for the nuclear industry, both in the US and the UK, is 0, where it's about 300 people every year struggle in digesting their food, and that lead to fatalities. So the the nuclear industry's safety record is impeccable. However, as we saw this morning on the news, nuclear plants can be put at risk. And as we saw, the Russian attack on the Kherson Dam placed the nuclear plant at risk. And earlier in the invasion of the Ukraine, Russia seized the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant and threatened to do all kinds of strange things with the plant to cause safety concerns. In March 2022, the US Department of Justice indicted 3 Russian intelligence officers who've been launching cyber attacks on energy companies around the world for more than a decade using the Dragonfly pseudonym. They also called themselves Crazy Bear. And they attacked, amongst others, a nuclear plant in Kansas and tried to mess with the control room of this nuclear plant. So despite the impeccable safety record of the nuclear industry, increasingly we see there's a growing interest amongst adversary nation states and hackers to attack these plants to put civilians at risk. The nuclear industry has different components which have attracted cyber attacks: the fuel cycle, the transport of nuclear material, of course the production of energy and nuclear plants themselves, and then waste storage. And one of the trend lines that have in particular attracted cyber attacks have been the fact that more and more of the control rooms of nuclear power plants are becoming digitalized and virtualized. Fortunately, we have some very exciting innovation that's taking place in the nuclear world, in the form that nuclear power is becoming smaller and smaller. So just as in the past we had very big old computer mainframes that was really only the domain of governments and research institutions in the 1960s, and then we had desktops and laptops, today mobile computing in our phones. We're seeing the same trend in nuclear energy. And nuclear energy plants are becoming smaller and smaller. And today we have small modular nuclear reactors, which are completely safe and mobile. And here in the UK, Rolls-Royce have taken the lead in this regard. In the US, we're invested in a company called X Energy, which is producing the first small modular nuclear reactor for Washington State, which is the first state that have legislated the need for clean energy and a total clean energy production. Nuclear energy is also moving into space. NASA has contracted X Energy to build the first small modular nuclear reactor on the surface of the moon for its Artemis moon base. And so protecting nuclear energy is becoming of critical importance. In 2022, the UK government issued a strategy for the protection of the civilian nuclear sector, and they followed. The US government has followed suit, and globally the International Atomic Energy Agency are putting out regulations and standards and benchmarks for the protection of the nuclear sector. One of the most important aspects of protecting nuclear energy for the future as a safe source of clean energy will be international collaboration and cooperation. And in this regard, in C5, we very much believe in collective defense. So in the US, we've created an Iron Dome for all the energy companies so that they can share data at machine speed and at real time of cyber attacks and cyber incidents, and can correlate those attacks and threats and protect and remediate in real time. And so we believe that international cooperation has a very key role to play in the protection of nuclear energy for the future. I hope that these remarks and insights have given you some sense of the very important contribution that cyber and nuclear and space will make to the future of the energy transition. Thank you so much.
Now, Andre, I'm going to ask you to stay here. I think we've got 2 minutes. And so just to give you some context, if you're not familiar with C5, they've invested in Synac. Anybody from Synac here? Because Synac team have been around? No, it's not tonight. Synac, Rapid SOS, Haven, Panacea. I mean, you've invested in some amazing cybersecurity companies. So I wanted to throw it open if anybody has any questions for Andre on the floor, and we're going to let him off cheap. Any questions? Oh, we've got a question at the back from Max. Have we got a roving mic? Oh, no, we got one right there, Max. Thank you so much. Far away.
Thank you. One of the big contradictions in the environmental movement, and particularly in green politics, is they want clean energy and zero carbon emissions from their energy production, but they don't tend to accept nuclear power. I just wondered whether you wanted to talk about that a little bit, and the kind of the impact that has on the level of security that's required from a cybersecurity perspective.
It's a really good question. So we've seen a real shift in that regard. The US government recently have come out and very clearly stated nuclear energy is considered to be clean energy, and there's a bipartisan consensus in the Congress between the Republicans and the Democrats about it being clean energy. And similarly, the European Union has come out and said nuclear energy is a very important form of clean energy. And we've seen a similar shift amongst NGOs and activist organizations who now very clearly endorse nuclear energy as a very important contributor to a net zero future. But there are still some activist groups who campaign against nuclear energy, and in this regard, I think we've seen some hacktivist attempts and incidents with nuclear power plants. I believe that as nuclear innovation and small modular nuclear reactors and nuclear fusion demonstrate the extent to which nuclear energy is completely clean and safe, I think the argument will be more and more won.
Excellent. Any other questions before we move on? You've got away very lightly, haven't you?
Thank you so much.
Andre, thank you so much. Okay, so on to our next presentation. We're going to hear from our headline sponsor, Atkins, and I'd like to invite Natalie Forrestal to come to the stage. Natalie, big round of applause for Natalie, please.
Very good. Good evening, everyone. I'm Natalie Forrestal, and I'm a senior cybersecurity consultant from Atkins, who are a global design, engineering, and project management consultancy. And today I'll be discussing the key role for cybersecurity to enable the shift to net zero. Before I go any further, hopefully this works. So I want to put a question to you all via this Slido link. Hopefully you can scan the QR code and it should direct you to the question. But yeah, I'd like to hear your take. What do you think will enable net zero through cybersecurity the most? Will it be people or will it be technology? This is a complicated question. There's lots of things to consider. We've heard a lot of sort of thoughts tonight on it. And hopefully, if you've all accessed that, we should be able to see your responses up on the screen as they come through. But yeah, a bit of background for this question. So this is essentially what I'll be talking about for the next 10 minutes or so, or 8:55. And it's something that hopefully you can take away from this event today and think about how this may impact your organisations. Okay, excellent. People currently in the lead. So just in the interest of time, I'll move us along. But yeah, keep thinking about this question from today, really, is the message here. So I'll be discussing 3 areas where I think it's really critical to embed cybersecurity. Firstly, in green technology that we will adopt in order to achieve our net zero future. Secondly, the enabling technologies that will support behaviour change in order to achieve net zero. And finally, people. We need to think about security and sustainability in the decisions that we make. So a little bit of background about myself. So during lockdown, like many of you, my partner and I realised we wanted to move out of the city. With the shift to remote working, we needed more space, both inside and outside. So we took the plunge and we moved to the countryside. And even more than that, we bought a project. Yay, homes under the hammer, here we come. Alas, we had to kick off the journey with a full rewire as well as replace the central heating entirely. And this made us think, how could we positively change our carbon footprint? What technologies could we adopt? Would we want to install a heat pump, solar panels, electric vehicle charge points? We've heard a lot about these wonderful technologies tonight. But then there's also the home management solutions like Hive, where you can sort of understand your energy use and look at that data and try to sort of reduce your energy use. So basically, there's loads and loads of options. And we couldn't install all of them, but we could put steps in place so that we could in the future. Although what we did do was we bought some really nifty Wi-Fi controlled radiator valves, which I would recommend. They were really fun to use. But why am I telling you about this? So how we change how we live, as well as the technologies that we need to adopt in order to reduce our carbon footprint, is something that many of us are having to think about and make decisions about. But have we really considered the security of these solutions? I mean, yes, this forum today, I'd hope so. But how is security embedded into their design? And how is our user data stored and used? So these questions aren't just facing consumers, they're facing organisations of all shapes and sizes. And over the past decade, many new technologies have flooded the market with the express purpose of helping us decarbonise, and countless more are set to enter as well in the future that don't even exist yet. And this is great. It's great that we've got these technologies coming in to decarbonise some of our most carbon-intensive industries. But these technologies will increase the attack surface because they are connecting to previously isolated technologies that were never designed to be connected to in the first place. But these technologies are really critical to our way of life. So you may have seen some headlines in the news talking about some of these cybersecurity concerns. You may think that existing regulation, like the Network and Information Systems Regulation, commonly known as NISA in industry, which was brought in to improve the cybersecurity posture of critical national infrastructure operators, would cover some of these concerns and mitigate against them. However, many of these new technologies, as well as these new sort of pockets of industry that we are creating, don't actually meet the supply thresholds in order to be subject to this regulation right now. But likely in the future they will be, and this will cascade to their supply chain as they do become part of our CNI. However, this introduces a risk that cybersecurity will be treated as a bolt-on, as an afterthought, as so often happens now. And then this will increase our cybersecurity risk in the long run. But we do have an opportunity right now for organisations to embed cybersecurity in the early stages during design and concept stages. And then this can be strengthened upon and evolved as these organisations scale. But this will require awareness of cybersecurity across the whole organisation and not just in the cybersecurity teams that they may or may not have. Excellent, very good. So in order to achieve net zero by 2050, we'll need more than just adopting green technology. We need to think about the wider behaviour change, which will be supported by technology transformation. So remote working is an example of this. This was proven to maintain and increase productivity over the COVID pandemic, and organisations globally are now shifting to a hybrid working model. And this isn't just great for workers, it also really benefits the environment, with reduced commuting being just one example. And in order to support this, we've had to adopt multiple different types of technologies and tools in order to collaborate and communicate effectively, although this is very much dependent on remembering to turn yourself off mute on calls. We have all been there. But yeah, in all seriousness, we have to integrate and adopt these solutions. And we have to think about multiple aspects, like the readiness of the IT estate, as well as how we set up and configure these devices. And when it comes to cybersecurity, we have to think about how these solutions are used and the risks associated. We have to think about the underlying security architecture, as well as how people are going to use these devices in their homes, their Wi-Fi configuration settings, as well as other devices in the home. But also importantly, password management and password reuse are a huge issue for organisations, and it's really difficult to implement appropriate controls against. Let's think back to the Colonial pipeline attack in 2021. This was the largest publicly disclosed attack on CNI in the US, and this was caused by an exposed password to a VPN connection on their network. They ended up paying millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin in order to recover their operations, although luckily most of this was recovered by US authorities. But in the long run, there could be some additional consequences. Say a chemical processing plant were to be attacked, and then pollutants were released into the water supply. As a result, there could be some direct consequences, like a ransomware payment or loss of production and therefore loss of income. But they could also be subject to substantial fines from government related to cybersecurity and environmental laws. effectively having to pay multiple times for one incident. Here we go. So I believe that ultimately this whole topic comes down to people. We make decisions based on cost, time, and benefit, but importantly, risk. Will a decision increase or decrease our organisation's risk profile? C-suites grapple with this question all the time as they are looking at how they must adapt their organisation to cope with changing environments. Times have changed, and while cost and efficiency savings are still important, cybersecurity and sustainability are increasingly on board agendas. But should they be considered jointly? What do I mean by this? Well, let's consider asset management. This is a critical foundation within cybersecurity. You can only secure what you know you have. Asset management is also crucial from a sustainability perspective. You need to know what you have, understand its carbon intensity, and baseline accordingly. But these two thought processes aren't generally considered jointly. And doing a full asset management investigation is something that a large organisation with an ageing IT estate are reticent to go digging for. But by having a combined cybersecurity and sustainability narrative is far more powerful and allows the problem to be tackled from both angles. And then this can lead to further collaboration in the future, such as what needs to be included in the asset inventory, as well as ensuring that sufficient value is extracted from the data in order to appease all of your stakeholders. And also, this thinking can extend to supply chain management. Having a well-understood supply chain benefits both cybersecurity and sustainability agendas. So today I've highlighted 3 key areas where I believe cybersecurity can enable the shift to net zero being a success. We need to think about embedding cybersecurity during the early design stages of green technology, as well as this continued iteration and scaling. We need to think about how this also applies to our supporting infrastructure and solutions to achieve net zero behaviour change. And finally, we need to ensure that all the people who are implementing these technologies and making these decisions are thinking about sustainability and cybersecurity. In order to do this, though, we will require a mindset shift in how we work. This isn't just at C-suite level, this is organisation-wide. We need cybersecurity professionals to think about sustainability, and sustainability professionals to think about cybersecurity, and everyone in between. And this is really crucial, because if we do not actively decide to secure our solutions that will deliver our net zero future, we will put our net zero future at risk. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. If you have any questions, do reach out to me afterwards. But if you scan that QR code, I wrote an article on the cybersecurity risks of electric vehicle charging. So if you're interested, do read that. And thank you again.
Natalie, thank you. Fascinating, really fascinating. I was maybe thinking we need the Chief Sustainability Officer is the same person as the Chief Security Officer, maybe. But I'm just thinking about the sort of home market. If we are buying heat pumps with controllers and lots of other sort of operational technology, how do we manage that in the home? How do we manage not only the security, but also the privacy? You know, you might have... I don't know how many devices you've got at home, but if we're going to be having more of these devices in our home, how are we going to manage them? How are we going to manage the security and the privacy? And is that a market that we should be getting into as the industry, as well as small businesses and large? So yeah, thank you, Natalie. That was really brilliant. We're now going to do a bit more of a technical deep dive, I'm hoping. And we're going to move on to Lee Chase, the CTO for National Security at Roke Manor, to take us to another level. Lee, come on up.
Good evening. Like a microbiologist who's run out of money, I have no slides. Now, the reason I'm concerned about this is, appreciate that. The reason I'm concerned about this is that photo is A, awful, B, slightly out of focus. It makes it look like a sort of wander around the wilds of Hampshire, near where I work, which makes me doubly scary because I'm out of focus all the time. But also, it's me staring into the middle distance like this. for extended periods. So my apologies for the next 9 to 10 hours that I'm talking to you about some of the things that we've been looking at with respect to this. So rather than slides, and I do wander, so apologies, I'm an ambler, but rather than slides, I'd like to talk to you in the context of a story that starts with my father, who many years ago said to me, I encourage you to think differently about your luck. Specifically, how you use your luck. And he said, think of it as a rock, as a stone, about the size of your fist. And the more lucky you are, you chip it off. But when it's gone, it's gone. Your luck is a finite quantity. Fast forward many years, a number of years proportional to the number of grey hairs that I now sport, and I'm a computer scientist. I solve problems, I build things, occasionally in that order. Sometimes I build things in search of a problem. But it is my privilege today to serve as the Chief Technical Officer and Technology Officer for the National Security business at Roke. And one of the things I'm very, very passionate about is how can we take the ideas that we learn from research, from development, from delivering national security solutions, how can we take those and bring those to bear in the context of things like net zero, things like climate change, think about energy. Now, why is this important? Because in many respects, net zero and cybersecurity aren't natural bedfellows. My experience is very few things are natural bedfellows with cybersecurity, and yet it is where all the interesting problems are. It's one of the areas that is the most compelling challenges in IT today, as net zero is a compelling challenge of our age. And ladies and gents, if we are not getting out of bed in the morning as scientists, as technologists and as engineers to take on these compelling problems, why are we getting out of bed? And I mean that most sincerely. So my background is cybersecurity, scientific computing and artificial intelligence. Now, for reasons of not falling into the conversational gravity well that is artificial intelligence, we're going to focus mainly on cybersecurity. But specifically, what are the qualities that make us successful in cybersecurity? And I think Ken's going to talk about some of this in a few minutes. But think about curiosity. Think about being determined. And think about the nature of what we have to do to understand the difficult problems. Because to exploit a system, you have to find one vulnerability, and there's normally a multitude or a plethora. I don't know what the collective term for vulnerabilities is. I think it's probably a nightmare of vulnerabilities that we have to deal with. But we only have to find one that we can exploit. But to defend a system, we have to find all of them, and then we have to do something about them. So the process of doing that, we learn. We develop curiosity, we develop determinism, and most importantly, we start to think orthogonally about problems that otherwise we might start to make assumptions about. Why is this important? Because these same skills are required for the sorts of ideas, the sorts of problem solving we're going to need to genuinely deliver net zero. Because like with cybersecurity, with the exception of IO validation, there is not one thing that we can do that's going to make a big difference. It's all the little things. It's all those things that matter, all those things that we can do every day. So let me give you some examples. One of the areas I'm particularly passionate about is how do we start thinking about source code? So I write quite a lot of source code, most of it awful. And over the many years, I've become quite a good debugger. Yeah. So maybe I'm running some C code, I'm running some val grind to go over my many and varied segmentation faults that I come across due to poor bounds checking, as the compiler will tell me. But I've never had a compiler tell me, had you thought about unbundling all these loops because you're wasting quite a lot of CPU cycles? Now, I've got enough people judging me in my life without adding compilers to it. However, this is an important point. Because as we start to think about alternative models of computation, non-von Neumann architectures, neurosynaptic computing, quantum computing, approximate computing, stochastic machines, we can think about, actually, what about a world where we're not relying on just a single architecture, a single type of machine that we're going to run this code on? And at the moment, particularly in scientific computing, we're very, very interested in how we find the right runtimes. So, for example, in quantum computing, we're interested in computational chemistry and crystallography because we know we can optimize the solutions to those problems on alternative models of computing, such as quantum. But what if we were to turn the problem around the other way and say, well, those techniques we've learned from cybersecurity around understanding our source code, around trying to minimize complexity, and I'll come back to that in hour 3 of this lecture series, is because as we understand complexity and security, they scale poorly together. Yeah. So when we start thinking about those runtimes, what if we started to use runtimes that were less about minimizing computational time complexity, minimizing computational space complexity, the classic P equals NP, which we are going to solve this evening, I assure you. Now, but on a serious note, what if we started saying, well, park that. What if there's environmental complexity? Yeah? So when we start building C compilers, or as I call them, the gentlemanly languages, strongly typed languages with compilers, none of this interpreted nonsense. I should state that's my view, not those of my employing organisation. Terms and conditions will apply. However, the point is this, that what if instead of just debugging symbols, we had something that was looking at our source code, looking at those numbers of loops that we're using, looking at control flow. Many years ago, a dear old friend of mine said to me, do you know, Lee, good programmers, really good programmers, will talk to you about control flow. They'll talk to you about languages. They'll talk to you about logic. I said, okay. He said, great programmers talk to you about data structures. And that's what this is about. Who here's a programmer? Who here's a software engineer? That's a different set of people. I love the fact those two groups are linearly separable. Excellent. Who here's in machine learning? Yeah, we all want the money. Anyway, but aside. But seriously, think about when you start building code, if you had something that said, actually, when we compile our data structures, we want to think about the energy consumption of this. This might sound like a really abstract idea, but we are looking at this. We're starting to instrument those systems right down to the Linux kernel. It's looking at, well, from cybersecurity, how do we prevent exploitation? We minimize the number of things that we're running. We reduce our attack surface. That's been talked about this evening. Well, that's something else we can do to prevent the number of cycles that we're using. We're wasting those cycles. And I'll leave you with this, and I will leave you, I promise, in the last few minutes, is there's a lot talked about, and I talked about the gravitational well of artificial intelligence, of everyone talking about this. One of my pet passions about computer science is that it's about taking on the enduring problems. Who here has heard of ChatGPT? Now, every time I hear this, I have this overwhelming notion to run for the hills. So one of my colleagues is in the audience, and he'll attest to this, because I've ranted many times, many times. As George Cantor would put it, an uncountable infinity number of times I've ranted about this, because yes, it's important. Yes, we have to focus on the next generation of technology, of course, and we are hoping that some of these things, and we've seen recently very promising results to do with generating new antibiotics, something that is compelling, and that's all about sustainability. It's more than just net zero. We should all care about this, quite sincerely. However, what if we go back to my dad's model of luck, and instead of it being luck, it's computation. Computation is a finite resource. We have to put energy in, and it's not just about running source code. It's not just about building a compiler for C that tells me off when I've got too many loops, or an interpreter for Python. We're not going to do it for JavaScript. We're not savages. Or Perl. Can you imagine trying to do an environmental complexity model for Perl? I think you'd have to write that in Lisp. Anyway, I digress. But the point is this, is we have to think about computation as not just a process by which we can do things, but a process that consumes energy and can help us to learn more about our energy consumption. So when we think about vanity projects, should we be, I'm not at all saying we shouldn't be doing research, but are there not more compelling problems than generating PowerPoint programmatically? Are there not more compelling problems than generating summaries of documents that, let's be honest, we probably weren't reading them for a purpose? Yeah? What about modeling the HIV virus? What about avian flu? What about COVID? What if we start thinking about how we apply computation for the purposes of solving not just problems that we think are interesting, but problems which we know to be impactful? Those things which are going to deliver a value, not today, not just tomorrow, but for generations. Because the purpose of computing is to solve those problems and to build those things. And I'm passionate about that, we're passionate about that. And from my point of view, although we work in national security, we have to do that sustainably. Because if we don't, we've got nothing left to secure. So just as my dad said, it's a finite resource. Use your luck and your compute wisely, because it won't be around forever. And I implore you this, don't waste it on JavaScript. Thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, much obliged.
Lee, I'm going to ask you to remain very quickly, because we do have time.
32 seconds.
So where are the software engineers? Can he say slash programs? No, I can't do that.
No,
delineate. Questions? Have we got any questions at this stage? No? I've got one. Right.
Yeah.
So if we're saying that there are ways to be much more effective in the use of CPUs, anybody in the government here? Anybody from government? Come on. You probably have a pixelated face. No? Well, if you're a big business or a business roke or a supplier to government, what would be good potentially, or I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, could government mandate levels of CPU usage and in the bid process? So it's accounted for.
Yeah, the phrase, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, happens very, very rarely with me. But to your point, we are starting to see through various contracting mechanisms an ecological agenda, yeah, within how we deliver technology, and that's important, and it's about through life agendas as well. So it's not just about what we deliver today, what we deliver tomorrow. It's like what happens to all this kit at the end of life. There's a lot. I think we're not going to see that level of instrumentation. We're very unlikely, I think, to see a government contract or indeed any other contract that says, right, you must use these languages, you must use these compilers, and we want to see the evidence. I think what's more likely is to go back to what we were talking about earlier, is to look at where the energy that's being consumed is generated. In the future, perhaps we would be able to look at those other things, and we would be able to meter and observability. Again, another key cybersecurity point is how we do observability in the same way that we've built over the last 20 years a far more comprehensive protective security monitoring model. We could do the same thing for, if you like, ecological computing, but that's a way away. I think initially it's going to be about energy generation, energy consumption, and then we'll get onto instrumentation.
Very cool. Did anybody read something about data centers that could heat swimming pools as a really cool thing?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, again, that seems such an abstract kind of swimming pool data center. Let's put them together. It's thinking like that.
Again, electricity and water conventionally not good bedfellows in that sense.
Necessarily great, but you know, it's things like that we can do. Thanks so much, Lee.
Much obliged.
Round of applause. Thank you. All right, you will be getting thirsty. I can feel the pent-up aggression. You've been a fantastic audience. We have one last fantastic speaker for you. So, please may I invite Ken Monroe, Matt Jones from Pentest Partners. Very excited to welcome you. Big round of applause, please, for Ken and Matt.
Let's make sure the technology works, shall we? Let's see if it's going to behave. Have you got a signal from me? This is when it works. We'll do it. Yes, good. Right, my name's Ken Monroe. I'm here to talk about some of the consequences of poor cybersecurity and how they lead to electronic waste. Who am I? I spent a lot of time researching the cybersecurity of smart devices, the Internet of Things. I'm a lousy pen tester, which is why I get sent out to do talks. There's a team of us at PTP that's, aside from doing things like red teaming, we spend a lot of time looking at embedded systems, whether it's the flight control system on an aeroplane, a navigational system on a ship, or today we're talking about smart stuff. You've probably seen some of the work we've done. One of my favorite jobs many, many years ago was a Samsung smart refrigerator. Wonderful bit of kit with a great big screen on the door and a camera on the inside. So you could walk up to it and see what was on the inside from the outside without opening the door. Wow. The purpose, the future of smart technology. Anyway, it's my pleasure to invite my colleague Matt, who's going to give his first ever public talk, so be sympathetic to him, and he's going to tell you all about a rather fun, sweary dolly. Matt, over to you.
No pressure then at all. Okay, so I'm Matt. I've been at Pentest 2 months, so they're throwing me right in the deep end. So this is Kayla. So Kayla was the first interactive child's doll. She works by the child talking to her, asking her a question. That question gets decoded into text, through to a mobile app, through a database, and then the answer is then provided. Quite simple. She has 3 main components. So you've got the microphone, speaker, and the Bluetooth connection. So essentially, she is just a Bluetooth headset dressed up in a doll's body. So you could use her as a phone if you want. Might get some weird looks, but, you know, each to their own. Anyway, the main problem with this doll is that there's no PIN code needed in order to connect to the device. So if you've got a mobile phone and are within range, then you can connect to this device no problem. It's not a hardcore hack, so anyone can do it. And obviously we know there's a load of unpleasant individuals out there. So this being a kid's toy, if it's for this say, let's say it's in a kid's room, that predator, let's call him or her, could be outside in the next house and could connect to this doll and then potentially listen to the kids' conversations and even speak to the children through the speaker. Not ideal. The good thing is that Kayla is actually now banned from sale. So she's effectively electronic waste, which is good. But that's Ken's point, and which he'll go on to talk about. Help me out here. About RIT waste and the effect that it has on the environment. Got there. Cool. So I've now lost my way. I've got some notes here. Give me a second. So we wanted to find out more. So obviously, I'm not a hacker myself, but the guys at PTP took this back and wanted to decompile the mobile app to see if we could find out more about this doll. So we found out that she actually recognises swear words. So that's quite interesting. We thought we'd work on that a little bit. So when a swear word is mentioned, she then prompts the child to then go basically speak to their parents. So they're basically, the doll tells off the child, which is a good asset to have. We then thought, how does the doll know what a swear word is? So we found out through the mobile app, through decompiling the mobile app, we found that there's a database called Bad Words. Now this includes 1,500 bad words, and obviously the weirdos at PTV then deleted that database, and now the doll just swears all the time, so it's great. I'm going to try and make it work. Give me 2 seconds. Let's try and connect. It did work before when I was practicing this in my bedroom, but we'll see if it actually connects. Yeah, here we go. Right, and then we go to YouTube. And I'm going to hold it up. It looks a bit weird.
Hello. Hey, calm down, or I will kick the shit out of you.
There we go. I'm back to Ken. Thank you.
Great job, Matt. Well done.
Cheers.
I love that dolly. So what happened? Why did we get a dolly swearing? Well, what really irritates me is when manufacturers of smart devices don't follow basic cybersecurity principles. We really struggled to get the manufacturer, in this case, to listen. In the end, they suggested we were playing a prank. Well, okay, listening to kids from being across the road doesn't sound like a prank to me. So we worked with a consumers organisation, the Norwegian Consumers Council. We reported it to the German telecommunications regulator, BNetzA, and the next day, they banned Kayla. They suggested she was a concealed surveillance device, broke some laws from 1947 in Germany, and they even issued instructions on how to destroy the doll. And you get a €25,000 fine just for owning her, which is really awkward because I had to give a talk in Munich. But hey, there we go. They even showed you how to destroy the doll with a hammer. I love this. But this is waste. This is unacceptable. People were left with dollies that they'd spent good money on, that they were now not allowed to even own, and they had to destroy. I find that terrible. Now, there are laws. In the UK, we've got some great laws. DCMS has got some great regulation coming out, which is fantastic. I think that's going to force manufacturers to follow some basic cybersecurity principles. I think more's needed. There's some great work going on in the EU from ENISA. But the rule that I really like was California Senate Bill 327. And the senator that introduced the bill said she was prompted to do so because of our work on my friend Kayla. Now, that's now law. It was law from January the 1st, 2020, which is great. So you couldn't own a smart device in the state of California that didn't have reasonable security measures. Unfortunately, I don't believe there's been any enforcement action taken since, which is a real shame. Surely we have laws in order to make change. Another crazy one. Okay, so Kayla, what's happened since? She was made by a company called Genesis Toys. They seem to have disappeared. We can't find any trace of them. Even the UK website has been defaced by hackers, but it's still up. That's crazy. So there's nothing left. Another crazy example I have with me. Who remembers the Cloud Pet? You don't remember the Cloud? Wow, she was awesome. This is amazing. This is very similar to my friend Kayla. The idea being is the child could have cuddly toy, and parents can send it messages. And they were extremely popular in the military for service personnel posted abroad. So whoever was serving overseas could send a message back to the kid. They could listen to it on the teddy. Unfortunately, the messages were stored in an open Amazon S3 bucket, and around 2 million private messages to children were exposed. The company, Spiral Toys, tried to avoid further investigation, but in the end, the US Senate caught up with them and asked them formal questions. Spiral Toys doesn't exist. I bought this one for £5 because it'd been remaindered. So the poor retailers were stocked with vast amounts of stock, which they had to sell off for basically nothing. More e-waste. What a shame. So that was a good few years ago. I'm sure you'll remember. So surely since then, manufacturers made things better, right? Well, does anyone remember? Did you have one of these when you were a kid? Did you have one of these? Yeah, a little wooden one, right? The Fisher-Price Chatterbox telephone. Believe it or not, they've made these things smart. So Mattel, who owned Fisher-Price, started shipping these in November last year, I kid you not, it's my friend Kayla all over again. It has got Bluetooth on it. The idea is you pair it to your phone, and you can then make telephone calls on the Fisher-Price Chatterbox phone, which is nuts until you realise there's no pairing pin, just like my friend Kayla. So again, same problem. Someone in the next door flat, street outside, next door neighbour can listen to the microphone and bug you through a child's doll. We told Mattel about this. We asked them for comment if they're going to fix it. They ignored us. Said it was an adult toy. Okay. And then silently fixed it a year later. So all of the existing product was effectively waste. I find that's really worrying. Other crazy types of smart junk. Some of you might remember that Revolve were bought out by Google. And Google decided to end-of-life the product, leaving people with $300 bricks. The Federal Trade Commission in the USA took action against them, and Google finally compensated their customers. But no cloud platform, your smart product is a brick. Now the crazy one, I'm sure some of you will remember my smart kettle, my Wi-Fi kettle. Wonderful bit of kit, because it's great, because you put it in the kitchen, there's an app. It means that when you wake up in the morning, you can roll over from your bed, press a button on the app, and by the time you get to the kitchen, you've got a kettle full of boiling water for your cup of tea, saving you, 30 seconds or so? Great, okay. Anyway, we looked at this and realised it's got some fairly major security flaws, including the fact you could stand on the street outside, do a wireless deauthentication attack, and steal people's Wi-Fi keys from it. Brilliant. So we reported this to the manufacturer because we're ethical and responsible, and they came back and said, it's okay, you need specialist kit, so £15 Wi-Fi antenna, and you'd also be very lucky to find someone with one of these kettles. It's a really unusual risk mitigation strategy. But of course, that's where they forget one of the features of Wi-Fi is, of course, there are war-driving databases out there, like Wiggle.net, where people have correlated the SSID, so the wireless access point name, with the GPS coordinates, and there are the Wi-Fi kettles in the west of London. But the manufacturer never actually recalled or solved the problem for these things, so you had to run the risk of boiling your water remotely or exposing your Wi-Fi key. Crazy. They finally released the Kettle 3.0, which is now much more robust. Another crazy device that's just waste. This is something we saw on the internet a little while back. A YouTuber was looking at this Bluetooth smart padlock. Now, I don't know about you, I'm continually losing my keys. Right? So the idea of having a fingerprint padlock is a really good idea, because I don't lose my fingers very often. Anyway, this was rather fun. Fingerprint Bluetooth padlock. Now, someone had noticed some problems. You could actually put a suction cup on there and unscrew the back of the lock off, but we thought that was a bit easy. We wanted to know how this smart Bluetooth lock worked. You could unlock it with a fingerprint, or you could tap your phone on it and unlock it over Bluetooth. So we started looking at it to see how it worked. It made lots of great claims on its website, suggesting it was really secure using AES 128-bit encryption. Sounds great, doesn't it? Must be secure. Until we started taking apart the mobile app to understand how it worked. And this was where things got a little bit interesting. We trapped the Bluetooth unlock process. We sniffed it to see what happened. We replayed it. The lock unlocked. So as long as you were within Bluetooth range of anyone, when they unlocked their Bluetooth lock, you could unlock it too. But that wasn't so great, because it meant you had to be there as someone was unlocking it. So a vulnerability, yes, but we wanted to go further. So we looked to see how the keys were exchanged that allowed you to unlock the lock over Bluetooth using a mobile. And we found this. So that's interesting. Why is it getting the MAC address? And we realized that the keys it was using were the Bluetooth MAC address. It effectively chopped it in two, uppercased it all, and that was the key that it used to unlock the lock. Now, the Bluetooth MAC address is the one piece of information you can get over the air from the lock, because it's Bluetooth. Turn it on, it emits its Bluetooth MAC address. So it was broadcasting its own key for you to unlock it. So you could walk up to it and unlock it actually faster with a hack than you could using the real app. Utterly nuts. That is junk. They don't ship it anymore. It's £100 or more. It's junk. It's complete waste. And to my last point, touched on by some of the other speakers, I want to talk just a little bit about smart energy. Now, if you want to go and see some scary things, go and read our blog about hacking smart car chargers, both commercial and domestic. We looked at 7 different brands, compromised 5 of them, had complete remote control of millions of smart car chargers. But I wanted to look with one of my colleagues at whether we could successfully take devices out of the loop. Could we hold smart devices ransom. I'm sure many of you know about ransomware on IT systems. But could you run ransomware on an embedded system? And that was a real challenge. So the idea came from an episode of Mr. Robot, my favorite hacking show. Why? Because researchers like ourselves contribute to the script. So they're the tools that we use when we're out there doing pen tests and hacks. And the story went that the hacker was going to compromise a smart thermostat in a tape storage vault so they could up the temperature in the storage vault and cause the tapes inside there to sublimate so the data would be lost. And they did it by putting a Raspberry Pi inside a smart thermostat. And we thought, yeah, I wonder if we could do it with a real embedded device. So we went off and started doing some research. And one of the great things about smart devices is if it emits RF, radio frequency, you have to register it in the US with the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which means that you can go and pull things like interior PCB, so printed circuit board designs, without even having to buy the product. And this is one we looked at. It was a Venstar device. And we pulled the schematics and the photographs. And before we'd even started, we noticed something really interesting. You can probably see just on the right-hand side, there are 6 brass circles. Now, that is highly likely to be JTAG. And that's one of the programming interfaces that we might be able to recover the firmware from. So, great, we've got a way in already. So we're going to buy some. And then we discovered that actually the manufacturer publishes their firmware on their website. So we got the firmware, we got it down, we decompiled it, we had to play with it, we started looking for vulnerabilities in it. What blew my mind is the poor quality of code running on so many embedded devices is absolutely mind-blowing. Good example here. This is a developer. We extracted the firmware, decompiled the binaries, and discovered this. So when it makes a failed SSL connection, it's called the SSL shit status. Wow, okay, that's interesting. So that's great quality code we're seeing here. Went a little bit further. This rather fun smart thermostat had a lovely high-definition screen. It could show a number of family photographs on. You could load your family pictures onto it if you wanted to. And the code that dealt with the wipes between the different photographs was called the son of a bitch mode. Wow. Now, of course, with this sort of stuff going on, you didn't expect much of the cybersecurity. And we actually spent quite a bit of time. One of my colleagues did an amazing piece of work and realized he could successfully run ransomware. It was the world's first. We did it in DEF CON in 2017, presented it there. We successfully encrypted and ransomed a smart device. So what? Well, if someone ransoms your device, you're going to rip it off the wall and replace it with a dumb device, aren't you? But that's not the point. The point is these devices, particularly where they're controlling air conditioning, maybe in warmer climates, maybe where they're controlling smart car chargers, where they're consuming 7 or more kilowatts, it's not about one device. It's about all of the devices. It's about the fact that a hacker can remotely compromise all of them at once and turn them all on and off and on and off concurrently. We've inadvertently created weapons that other nation states can use against us, potentially destabilizing our power grids because we want to do stuff remotely. And we don't take cybersecurity seriously enough. We've inadvertently exposed the stability of our power grids. The good news is in the UK, the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles saw some of our work on smart car chargers and have made some regulatory changes that mandate a 2-minute random waiting period before the smart car charger turns on. Brilliant. It removes that spike from the power grid. Anyway, what I want to conclude with is we're buying products and we have little assurance of their cybersecurity. If the cloud platform goes down, we've got a brick, we've got junk, and we are piling up electronic waste because we're not doing cybersecurity assurance well enough. Anyway, hope you found it interesting. That's me. Follow us on LinkedIn. We blog about this sort of thing every day of the week. Thank you.
Fantastic. We do have time for a couple of questions. Oh, we've got one question here. Can we get a microphone, please? Straight away. Ken, if you can give me a couple of minutes.
How did you get the doll if it's no longer available?
Well, actually, the same story about the kettle. They are incredibly rare. They pop up on eBay from time to time second-hand, and usually you see a pile on as all the cybersecurity researchers are trying to buy the remaining ones. I actually accidentally competed on eBay with one of my colleagues trying to buy the same damn dolly. That's another story.
Excellent. Any other questions? Nope, you are a thirsty bunch. Marvellous. Thank you so much, Ken. Really fascinating. Okay, so we're nearly done. You have been a fantastic audience. I'm now going to pass over briefly to Monica Radcliffe from Plexel for some community announcements. Monica.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Monica from Plexel. Why, those slides are really light. I can't see anyone. Got a couple of community announcements, mostly applicable to cyber startups or individuals thinking of setting up a new cyber business. So there's 3 programs that are currently open for applications to you. First one I'd like to highlight is local to here, NCC for Startups. So that is supported by the National Cybersecurity Centre. It's a program for businesses at any stage, but you must be solving a specific challenge that NCC has set. So this is open to businesses of any stage, but if you're interested to hear about what challenges we have available, and ransomware is one of them, please do come and have a chat with me or one of my colleagues. I'm just trying to look at for Ruby over there. So come to have a chat with us or look up NCSC for Startups online and you get a list of all of the challenges. The other 2 programs I want to flag to you are under Cyber Runway banner. So this is a program funded by DCIT, Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. Cyber Runway is open to startups across the whole of the UK. And the first program, Cyber Runway Launch, is open to really early stages of businesses. So if you're just at an idea stage, you're thinking about setting up a business, this is the right program for you. It's a 3-day-long bootcamp in London, which will be taking place in July. So that's for really early stage. And the second one, Cyber Runway Ignite, it's more for more advanced businesses. It's a very bespoke, highly personalized leadership program for businesses looking to really fast-track their business. So those 2 programs are available and open for applications right now. Again, my colleagues Dai and Maria over there as well. Please come and grab them or come and have a chat with me or look at cyberrunway.plexel.com. cyberrunway.plexel.com to find out more.
Fantastic.
And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monica. Great to see you. Keep clapping. I want one more last clap for our wonderful speakers this evening. Thank you very much, speakers. Many of whom will be knocking around, so please do grab them independently and have a chat. Massive thank you to Atkins, our headline sponsor. These events are free to you. They are not free to us, SINAM. If you would like to sponsor our final event of the year later in the year, please do grab myself, grab Reed, grab anybody in the SINAM team, because we are looking for sponsors for later in the year. Thank you all for coming, and we hope you've enjoyed the content. Your feedback is absolutely invaluable, so please do, good or bad, we want these events to be as impactful and as relevant to you, the community, as possible. So please do let us know what we can do better, let us know if we're getting it right. That would be very much appreciated. There is now a networking event with drinks until 11 o'clock, sponsored by the incredibly generous people at QA. QA, give us a wave. Anybody from QA? Wonderful. One person. Well done. Yes, thank you very much. We'll see you there. And it's just over at the Nook. If you don't know where that is, a big square building, new build just over the way. Follow the crowd as we go over there. The community aspect to this is really, really important. So you being proactive in meeting with new people, please do that, okay? SINAM is all about networking, collaborating, and innovating. And we've already seen examples of new companies, new ideas, new things happening where you as a community have got together and actually met people in a bar, in a pub, or randomly, okay? Big believers in that. This is your opportunity. If you've got a great company that you want to speak to, you need investment, you've got a great idea, you need new people, whatever it is, this is a great opportunity for you to maximize that. So please, please, please do it tonight with a free beer. Lovely. Okay, so that's that. Anything else that we need to do? I don't think so. We've got our socials. Yeah, we've done all that. Great. Last thing to say is Cheltenham Festivals is a charity. Please, please, please do donate to them if you feel this has been good. They are a wonderful attribute to the Cheltenham ecosystem, and long may that continue. Other than that, you have been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming, and we will see you at the Nook shortly. Good night.